We begin with breaking news out of Washington. Former U.S. President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with what his office says is an aggressive form of prostate cancer that has spread to his bones. CBC's Katie Simpson is tracking this story for us out of our Washington bureau. Katie, what do we know so far?
Well, the news is being shared by the former president in a statement late this afternoon. And it reads, the president last week, Joe Biden, former president, was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer with metastasis to the bone. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the statement says the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. It goes on to say the president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. Now, Biden will have access to some of the best medical care in the U.S., if not the world. The 82-year-old left office earlier this year. He, of course, dropped his re-election bid months before the last election over concerns about his health and fitness. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control says among men, prostate cancer is the second most common type of cancer, with age being a key risk factor.
Katie, I know that world leaders and people who have worked with Joe Biden have been sharing their thoughts. What's some of the reactions so far?
Yeah, we've heard from former U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, who, of course, was his running mate in 2020 and then succeeded him to be the Democratic nominee in 2024, saying she is saddened to learn of Joe Biden's diagnosis, describing him as a fighter. We've heard similar language from people who used to work with Joe Biden. And we also have a statement from U.S. President Donald Trump. It says, Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery. Joe Biden, cancer has touched the Biden family before. Something about Joe Biden's political career, whether people agree with him or disagree with his political stances or what he did as his time as president. One thing that he did as a politician is that he often tried to relate to people through sort of grief and their darkest moments. Joe Biden has been a politician who has been through extreme personal loss. And one of the most recent and most painful losses he's gone through in his life was the 2015 death of his son, Beau Biden, who died of brain cancer. It's believed his brain cancer was a result of his service in the U.S. military and exposure to burn pits. But he was only 46 years old. After the death of Beau Biden, once Joe Biden did get back into politics after he was vice president, took some time away, got back into politics in the 2020 election, he decided to, align a number of his initiatives or really put resources toward cancer treatments as well as diagnosis and research, putting a lot of effort and emphasis into that, organizing the donation or the contribution of millions and millions of dollars for innovation and research and trying to make it easier for patients to get treatment so they don't have to travel to multiple spots to get different kinds of treatments for whatever it is they need care for. So that is something that Joe Biden has. It's been very close to Joe Biden. It's something that he spent a lot of time sort of trying to put a lot of effort and awareness into, of course, being touched by cancer with the death of his son back in 2015. But all we know for now in terms of this is this statement from Joe Biden's personal office. We're told that Biden is in Delaware with his family as he does consider his next options.
Katie, thank you so much for that. As you pointed out, the Biden family has really had an extremely unusual string of bad luck and tragedies in their lives. But certainly this looks like, from the information we have, like it was caught early enough, and that certainly he'll have the best treatment options available. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Kate Bettingfield is Biden's former White House communications director. In an interview shortly after the news broke, she said this news is hitting her and her former co-workers very hard.
It is incredibly sad. It's heartbreaking. I've heard from a lot of folks in this last hour or so since the news broke, people who have worked for him for a long time, who are sad, who are sending their best to him, who are feeling devastated by this news, to be candid. Obviously, I worked for him for a long time and saw up close how caring he is with his staff. And, he's the first person, if somebody on his team gets a piece of bad news, certainly a bad medical diagnosis, but even a smaller piece of bad news. He's the first person to, to pick up the phone, to call, to have them come in, to write them a letter. I mean, he's just incredibly thoughtful in that way. And so, to see somebody that we care about have to endure this himself, it's hard, and his staff are taking it hard.
That's Kate Bettingfield. She is the White House Communications Director under Joe Biden. Now, for more on former President Biden's prostate cancer diagnosis, we're joined by Dr. Peter Black. He's the director of the Vancouver Prostate Center. Dr. Black, thank you so much for making time for us tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Black, first question. Obviously, lots of men, especially men in the age range of Joe Biden, are diagnosed with prostate cancer. This is something that touches many families. When we're talking about something that's described as having an aggressive form that has metastasized to his bones, what is generally the prognosis for this type of cancer?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There's a broad spectrum of prostate cancer, from very early, relatively harmless disease to something that's high risk and has already spread. And so Joe Biden fits in that latter group as probably the highest risk of what we can diagnose. So his prognosis, I would say, is relatively poor in that we cannot cure this typically. The good thing is that prostate cancer, even as in its worst case, is relatively slow growing so that we can control it for several years.
We know that one of the informations we got is that it is hormone responsive, and that his doctors and people in his communications team said that is good news because it means it can respond to some hormone, to treatments that target testosterone, I believe. Talk to me a little bit about that type of treatment.
Yeah, so I think, any metastatic prostate cancer is typically treated with hormone therapy. As you suggested, we give drugs that block testosterone and other male hormones, and the prostate cancer is dependent on those to grow. And it's really a remarkably effective treatment. And we classify prostate cancer as hormone sensitive or hormone resistant. I think it's actually too early to say that it's sensitive. All that means is that he hasn't actually had hormone therapy yet. We would anticipate that it will respond to hormone therapy, but we don't really know until we give it.
What are some of the symptoms that a patient who has been given this diagnosis would have noted? We don't know whether it was symptoms that prompted Joe Biden to go and get that checkup that eventually discovered the nodule. Was it a routine examination, or was it something that he was experiencing? But what are some of the symptoms that people would experience with this diagnosis?
Yeah, I think so. Some of those details are interesting. We screen for prostate cancer with a blood test, PSA, prostate-specific antigen, and you might expect that Joe Biden as vice president and then Joe Biden as president would have had that regularly. And so you wonder about his PSA. That hasn't entered the news at all. But from a symptoms point of view, prostate cancer can either cause local symptoms where the prostate is, it sits just below the bladder. And so it can block flow of urine so that men have a weak stream and difficulties emptying their bladder. And that was mentioned in the news that he may have had some symptoms. These symptoms are very common in men as they age. So men over the age of 50 will often have these symptoms that are unrelated to prostate cancer, just that the prostate grows. Nonetheless, it's always worthwhile checking those out. There's also, in the news, it was also commented on that there was a nodule that they could feel in his prostate. And I would say that this is, only about 10-15% of prostate cancer is diagnosed that way. The most are really diagnosed because of the blood test, the PSA.
So interesting. While we still have you, you mentioned that from the information we have so far, and who knows how much information that is or how accurate it is, but that his prognosis would not be very optimistic right now. But what are typical timelines for the progress of this type of illness, and what are the survival rates?
Yeah, so I think, we don't have all the information, so we can only guess. If we took all patients with metastatic prostate cancer, prognosis is actually in the order of about 5 years, which is very favorable compared to almost any other metastatic prostate cancer. And Joe Biden is 82 and has had some other health issues. So he may very well die of something else before he dies of prostate cancer. So this may not actually be life-limiting for him. With the hormone therapy that he will almost certainly get, he will have side effects, and he'll have to live with the side effects, but he could still enjoy a very good quality of life for several years.
Dr. Black, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That was Dr. Peter Black, director of the Vancouver Prostate Center.